talk about fears. Let's talk about love. Yeah, I got fears, but I ain't got no love.
So today we're going to talk about Jeffrey Dahmer. And before I get into Jeffrey Dahmer, I got a couple things here I want to announce. Number one, I want to thank Kimberly Tilley. She sent me this book. And I like those old mysteries, old cold cases. So she sent me that, and I appreciate that, and I just wanted everyone to know that. In addition, Atmosphere Collectibles sent me this great, awesome t-shirt and a bunch of other things. Leonard Skinner vinyl, Waylon Jennings vinyl. I mean, boy, they know my taste. So I appreciate that. I haven't had the time to cut the sleeves off this yet. So this is what you get. A sleeve shirt, but it fits perfectly. So anyhow, support them. They got a webpage, Facebook, Instagram account. Check them out, Atmosphere Collectibles. And support small business, and they're a record store too. I mean, and support music, and in this case, rock and roll and outlaw country. I'm a big fan of both. So go check them out. Thank you, Jerome and Ashley, for sending me this. Now, let's get to Jeffrey Dahmer. So everyone has been watching, I guess, the Monster on Netflix. I wasn't going to watch it, but I did because it intrigues me. I never really knew too much about Dahmer. I never delved into him, and to be honest with you, I think because when this happened, 1991, I was in 11th grade. I kind of chalked him up of just being crazy, because you hear the headlines about him eating his victims and things like that. I remember seeing it, but it didn't interest me. And I think it's because in my mind, I chalked him up to being crazy. And that didn't intrigue me. Well, you know, what intrigues me is regular people who seem normal doing crazy, inhumane, and unthinkable things. That's what always intrigued me, like Ted Bundy. And there's some similarities here, and we'll get into that. But Dahmer never really intrigued me. However, this series I watched, and I was intrigued. And I thought it was very, very well done. Some of the scenes were a little too drawn out for me, but, man, that guy who was acting as Jeffrey Dahmer, whew, man, he's got to be up there. I never heard of him before, but you know, he has to be up there with some of the best actors of at least this generation. My goodness, really good. But anyhow, Dahmer, and what it comes down to is, to me, whether he was insane. I mean, he pled insanity, or not. And I think most people that look at his crimes, you know, he killed 17 victims, mostly black or I think Latino. There was maybe one white victim. That was his first one. But we'll get into all those murders and all those kills and how they escalated and so on and so forth. But I guess most people looking at him would just say, yeah, he's crazy. You got to be crazy. And they did this mostly in 90, but we start going back into time, into the 50s. We'll start at 1950s all the way up to the 1980s. When you had a crime where you were like, my goodness, how could somebody do this? The only explanation is, he must be crazy. And that's the label that they got. Now that has changed. And I'm going to say that's changed right around, probably right after Dahmer. So probably in the 1995, 96 range. I think that has changed. Where, listen, you can't just blame everything that you don't know on craziness. That doesn't fly. You have to dive a little bit deeper and figure out the real root and the real cause of that. And in this case with Jeffrey Dahmer, this is a true classic sign of nature versus nurture. Was he born that way, or did society or something else turn him into what he became? And I'll give you my opinion on that after this video. Not after it, at the end of it. So, first let's talk about Jeffrey Dahmer and his background. Okay, now I'm not an expert on Dahmer, by no means. I don't consider myself an expert on any single serial killer or entity. Maybe one case would be the Gail Matthews case and Don Miller case. I mean, because I worked on those two intimately for years. So yeah, I guess I would be an expert matter on those two cases. But these, I mean, there's people that dedicate their lives writing books, studying Dahmer, studying Bundy, and they're the experts. I don't claim to be. Some of the stuff that I might give you could be wrong. Not in my opinions. My opinions certainly can be wrong. But in the facts that I provide, in the research I've done, because, as you know, not all news is the truth. So, the research I did, this is what I come up with. If I'm wrong on some of it, you know, hey, that's on me, I guess. But for the most part, I would say that I can talk pretty intelligently about any serial killer once I've researched them. Again, I might not be an expert. But Jeffrey Dahmer was born into a house that was divided. And by divided, I mean a divorce. Now, that is not always an indicator of somebody going to be a serial killer. Nor is somebody who, in the 70s, they've come up with that started fires, wet the bed, tortured animals. Okay? Dahmer didn't have all three of those. And look what happened. So, what I'm saying is you can't always go by what was researched and said before. You have to make your own, I guess, constructive theory and analysis of a case, investigate it, before you can just jump on that bandwagon. So he comes from a divorced family. Well, that doesn't mean he's going to be a serial killer. In this instance, it does. But what this does, I believe, is shows his resentment towards abandonment. And I think you see that as we progress into his victims. You will see that he does not want to be alone. Although he is a loner, he's a loner because he's odd. Now, growing up, again, his parents divorced. Apparently they fought a lot. According to the Netflix series, he would try to, his dad would try to bond with him certain ways. You know, and I think that obviously is normal for any caring father. You want to go out and try to see what they enjoy. Do they like sports? Let's go out and try baseball. Did you enjoy that? No, I really didn't like it. Okay, well, how about band? Did you? No, I really didn't like it. And you hope that they find something that they gravitate towards, because idle hands will sometimes make for a mess. So, in this case, it appears that what young Jeffrey Dahmer liked to do was dissect roadkill. Now, in my research, I didn't see that. But in the Netflix series, not only showed that, but kind of focused on that. So I would assume that it's true. Now, if that is true, is that a poor choice by the father? Well, the majority of you would say yes. And I see where you're coming from. I don't think that I would do that. But in his mind, the father's, maybe he's thinking this is something he enjoys, so we're going to do it. Never thinking in a million years it's going to lead to him doing the exact same thing to human beings, which it did. I'm not saying it led to that, but he did. But during interviews, Jeffrey Dahmer said that he enjoyed that. He enjoyed that feeling of pulling out the entrails and feeling the muscles and stuff. So right there, I think, is a good indication of whether it is nature or it's nurture. And I would tend to lean to nature, meaning he was born like that. Now, his father in the Netflix series seemed to try to take some blame for that by saying he had those thoughts. I don't know if that is all that uncommon. It is whether you act upon certain thoughts. You know, there's many of you out there that have gotten so angry that you say, I could kill them. But you don't. Now that's different types of anger. You know, that's a lot of rage. This is not that. This is killing to quench a thirst, to quench a compulsion of which he had. Now, Jeffrey Dahmer would go on to say that he certainly did not hate these people. It wasn't a race thing, which I firmly believe is true. It was simply to control and to dominate. Now, where do you see that? We see that in rape all the time. It's not always about the sexual gratification. You get that through the control and the domination. So, when we look at Jeffrey Dahmer and his background, the divorced parents, the dissecting of roadkill, the loner, the goofy kid who would sometimes act out, which this is very important, would act out to try to make other people laugh in order to kind of maybe gain acceptance. I mean, I've seen those type of people in high school where they're really, you know, nobody really cares about them. They're an afterthought. And they might even get picked on. But they do something funny. Whether it's at the expense of somebody else or not, they get a laugh out of that. And now they got attention. And they're thinking, well, now maybe I will not get picked on. And these people will accept me if I continue to do that. The Netflix series showed that. As Jeffrey being in high school and mimicking a mentally retarded person. And made people laugh. And then he took it a little too far. Fast forward to his time in prison after these arrests and him making fun of body parts and putting ketchup on them and eating them. Not doing that for any other reason than to try to gain acceptance and make these people laugh. It's a direct correlation to what he did in high school. Now, I guess there's some question as whether he even did that, but it's been documented a couple of times, including by the prisoner who ended up killing Jeffrey Dahmer. So, in any case, we look at victimology, right? Well, here we got at least, and I say at least, 17 known victims of Jeffrey Dahmer. Now, we're not going to go into the victimology of every single one, and I hate to lump them all under one umbrella because they're all different. Yet, they all made a fatal mistake of trusting Dahmer. Now, the first was a hitchhiker. We all know how hitchhiking usually ends up. Not good. But the majority of them were gay minorities. Now, why? Again, I had said that some people thought this was a racially motivated crime, and they even protested, and I think that was wrong. I don't think that the protest should have been about race. Protest certainly should have been about whether the police did their job or not. And that ties into race, because I feel that if they were middle-class white people that were missing, a lot more would have been done. I have no doubt about that. And that can be disputed all anybody wants. But I firmly believe that to be the case. That's what should have been protested. Dahmer picked his victims, he said, because of their beauty, their skin, their overall beauty and attraction. Yes, I believe that in a way, but I think a bigger part of that is that they were easy to have access to. He would go to the local gay dance club and pick them up. I mean, it was easy, and it worked once. So what happens when it works once? You keep going back to it. The direct correlation to Ted Bundy. You have a ruse, you use it to get them back to your house. Atlanta child killings. What's his name? Is it Wayne Williams? Exact same thing. And that's what you have to look at as a criminal profiler. I don't believe a profiler was ever brought in, because these missing persons were never grouped together. There was no correlation between them. Had there been, like the Atlanta child killings, and a criminal profiler was brought in, one of the first things I would have honed in on, number one, okay, so how does this work? You come into the police station, they'll give you all the missing persons. Okay, let's say there's 10. You lay them out. Well, what do they have in common? Well, by looking at the pictures, I can tell they're all minorities. Okay, well, that's a clue. Number two, their sexual orientation. What? They're all gay? Okay. See how you're starting to narrow down your pool? Third, if they're missing like that, there's got to be a ruse involved. So you would start to articulate that, well, maybe he's picking them up at a gay club, some sort of place where homosexual minorities gather. That's your first clue. That's where you would start honing in on. So I would be putting undercovers in the bars, in those types of areas where that happens. None of that happened. So, but I'm just saying that's how criminal profiling would work when you go in there. Of course, you look at the crime scenes and those things as well, but the very first thing you do is look at the victimology and what do they all have in common. So he starts killing these people, and the first thing that jumped out to me when I look at his timeline of killing is his first one in 1978 when he was 18 years old. And then the next one, I believe, which was in 1987? 9-year gap in between murders. Where have you seen that before? I think, right off the bat, the BTK killer, Dennis Rader, stands out to me. So you know that it's done. Are there any victims in that 9-year gap? I'm going to say no. But the reason I say no only is because I watched interviews with Jeffrey Dahmer. And he came across to me as very forthright when he said, he was asked point blank, why didn't you not kill? Should we believe that you didn't kill in those 9 years? He says, well, the opportunity never presented itself. That is a very genuine answer. Now, during his interviews, I did see him minimize some things. And by minimize, I mean you don't want to fully tell the truth for whatever reason. It might be embarrassing to you, it might be embarrassing to your family. You don't want people to know it because it's whatever. But he's minimizing it, but for the most part, he's very truthful. He understood that he had a problem. Much like Bundy. He knew that there was this compulsion into him to kill, because that's how they got off. This is one of the areas where Dahmer minimized, where he said that he did not kill as a sexual gratification. It was just a compulsion to control and to dominate. Yes, Jeffrey, that is true, but you did that control and domination because it gave you a sexual gratification. If it didn't, you would not have stood above the bodies and masturbated. It got you off, just like it does all serial killers who kill for that reason. Again, it goes to show you how strong the urge is, the sexual gratification part of it. It is in nature, just in nature alone. People underestimate the strength of sex. It is ingrained in you to procreate. Just think if sex was not enjoyable. Let's say nature made it that way. It's not enjoyable. Think of how less the population would be. It's enjoyable for a reason. I think, obviously, to procreate, maybe. I don't have the answers to the world. But it is something that you feel compelled, like a pull to do. Some people suppress it or masturbate. That's what you do. But there's others who want to couple that with control and domination to get the ultimate high and kill. Now, some will rape and they kill as kind of an afterthought. They don't necessarily get off on the killing part of it. They do that in order to not get caught. You know, she can't identify me then, so I kill her. That is a population of serial killers. But the bigger population, I believe, is the ones that get sexual gratification from the killing, which Dahmer did. Now, because of this control and this domination, we are compelled to ask certain questions, such as, was he evil? Well, certainly, you could classify him as evil. You have to look at, not only does he kill, he dismembers, he saves some of the body parts, he keeps the skulls, he bleaches the skulls, he decorates his apartment with skulls, he also eats some of the victims. Now, when you say that, over 3/4 of the audience watching this will say he is absolutely nuts. Sure, that's a knee-jerk reaction because we are so repulsed by it. Yet, I don't believe that he was crazy. He knew the difference between right and wrong. But he was pushing those boundaries to the nth degree. Okay? Jeffrey Dahmer not only had a compulsion, but he had a curiosity. The curiosity to explore. That started with the roadkill. That started with the feeling of the insides of these animals, which progressed to humans. But it escalates all the time. You looked at his very first killing in 1978 of the hitchhiker, which he says was not planned. It was spontaneous. And I believe him. Yet, he did have a plan to do something. Or else, why would he pick him up and take him to his house when the kid wanted to go to a rock concert? You only do that because you have some sort of plan. Whether it was to rape, he says he just didn't want the guy to leave him. Well, then you had to have a plan, right? You know he's got to leave at some point in time when you're taking him to your house. The only way to make him not leave is to kill him. So maybe it was not premeditated. I think Jeffrey Dahmer has a big issue with his homosexuality. I don't think he ever fully admitted that. But it was. And I think it was something he struggled with. And it's another factor in his upbringing. He knows it isn't right. By isn't right, I'm not saying that people shouldn't be homosexual. I'm saying how it's making him feel. And it doesn't feel natural to him. Probably because of what society is feeding back to him in magazines, his parents, you know, those things. Hey, I'm a firm believer, and I honestly mean this. People should be able to have any type of relationship they want. I could care less if it's a man and man, woman and woman. I don't care. It doesn't affect me. You know? That's my belief. Now, do I cringe when I see it sometimes? Yeah, maybe a little bit. When I see a guy kissing another guy, makes me feel a certain way. Not a good way either. I cringe. But that's me. That's my own personal opinion. But I support them. You do whatever you want to do, buddy. I mean, whatever makes you happy. Who am I to say, well, I don't want to get into all this, okay? But that's how I feel, okay? I don't care what you do with your life. I don't care. Be happy. That's what life's about. So, there's a couple things, again, his homosexuality and his alcoholism that had a big influence in him becoming who he became. And who he became is a serial killer. Alcohol for him was a crutch to deal with his problems that he could not internalize. He couldn't make sense. He knew what he was doing was just not right. Killing, picking up gay men, being a homosexual, taking photographs, controlling, dominating, dismembering, killing, eating, all of that. He knows. It's not normal. So how does he cope with it? He copes with it by drinking. But what else does the alcohol do? For him, it lowers his inhibitions. Right? Think of when you were younger, or if you're younger now and you're watching this, when you go out to the bars. Guys, if you've ever had a one-night stand or you've picked up women at a bar, when do you do it? Well, I'll tell you. 2 o'clock, last call. Everybody's drunk. Everybody's inhibitions are lowered. And sometimes you've woken up in the morning and said, oh my God, what did I do? And you look over, peek over your shoulder. You know, sometimes doing that coyote where you're chewing off your arm. Oh, we've all been there. Why? Alcohol. Dahmer used alcohol for those reasons. It gave him courage as well as quashing. So, if he had not had alcohol in his life, would he have done this? Yes, I believe he would have. Pornography. He didn't put the blame on pornography, but he did say pornography tied into this, just like Ted Bundy did. Is that an excuse? No, it's not an excuse. He's not blaming it. He's just trying to tell us so we understand. And I give Dahmer a lot of credit in being very forthright and trying to let people understand what was going on inside of him. The trophies, not just the body parts, but the keeping of IDs, the taking of pictures. He says that the reason he did this, again, was to keep them with him. His fear of abandonment. I say that goes back to his childhood and his parents splitting up. His parents leaving him alone when he was a senior in high school for months. That's when he starts drinking. Hell, he went to class and started drinking. That's an issue, folks. His parents do have to take responsibility for that. Absolutely. Now, again, I think it's nature, not nurture. I think this is something that he was born with. Yet, nurture played into it. It certainly did. His feelings of abandonment, without a doubt, pushed him into this serial killing mode. So he started keeping the trophies. Now, he says it was because he wanted to keep them with him, but it's also for sexual gratification. I don't care what Jeffrey Dahmer says. He's minimizing that. He is using those photographs that he took of his Polaroid, and he is masturbating to them. He's taking the heads of the victims, storing them in his refrigerator. Yes, it's to keep them, but it's also to masturbate to them. Or do other things, like Ted Bundy did with the severed heads. Georgette Hawkins. He did some very vile things. So, I'm shocked that they didn't bring up any correlations to Ted Bundy. And they did John Wayne Gacy. I see why. I mean, Gacy's was all gay men, I think, as well. Boys. But a lot more victims. I think he had like 33. And I'm going to get into him at some point too. But I think I see more similarities with Ted Bundy. That's just me. We talked about his jokes in prison, you know, and the reason I believe that he did that. His very calm demeanor. Boy, did he have a calm demeanor. No one ever really saw him blow up. And I'm wondering if that's the alcohol suppressing that. But he wanted to pretend that he cared about the victims. And he had said that I drugged all my victims and then I strangled them so they didn't feel anything. Well, maybe you did do that on some, Jeffrey. I understand. But there was one victim where you slashed his throat because you didn't have any sleeping pills. So maybe that was an afterthought of yours. I tend to believe you did that so they wouldn't struggle, not so they wouldn't feel anything. I don't believe Jeff cared that they felt anything. It was more so he could manhandle them. I mean, there was no fight back. Now, his second victim, which again was 9 years apart from the first victim, and let me go back to the first victim. I think it's very important to try. This tells you whether he knew right from wrong. So he kills the hitchhiker. He either buries it in a shallow grave in his grandmother's, or I think it was his father's house outside, or put him in a drainage ditch. But then he eventually dismembered the body, took all the flesh off of the bones, and then hit the bones with a sledgehammer and then spread them out. That is a very meticulous way of disposing a body, right? That right there tells you he knew right from wrong. I think he would have had a better time trying to explain that he was insane at trial if he had just left that body out along the road. When you take the time to dismember it so you don't get caught, all the way to the point where you not only are burying a body, you're pulverizing the bone to avoid identification. You know right from wrong. So he does that with his first victim, which he again didn't drug. He hit with a barbell and then choked him with it. So he was conscious too. So this bullshit about him not wanting the victims to feel pain, that's minimizing. That's complete minimizing. The second victim he took to a hotel, and he says he completely blacked out, and when he woke up, the guy's chest was caved in, and he killed him. In the Netflix series, you show him trying to revive him. I don't know about all that, but he took the body out in a suitcase and then took to his grandmother's house and dissected him and threw away the body parts, I believe, in trash bags in the dumpster. Now, when killers tell me that they blacked out, I've had that happen numerous times. And I always wonder if they're telling the truth. And I think I told the story in the last video, or maybe 2 videos ago, about when I blacked out in a fight one time that I had. And I'd always believed that people who said they blacked out was bullshit. But it did happen to me. And yeah, now that I think about it, I was going to say Jeffrey Dahmer will blame alcohol on that, but I had alcohol in my system at the time of that fight as well. But I do believe that Jeffrey Dahmer is probably telling the truth there. But man, to cave somebody's chest in, and he says that he beat him to death with his fists. For somebody that doesn't have a lot of rage or anger, apparently, and you're doing this for gratification, that's a lot of damage. So I'd be curious to know more about that victim. I would tend to believe that that victim did something, said something, that unleashed all that rage and that anger in Dahmer. So if I had a guess, I would say that that second victim wasn't just a sexual gratification type of killing. There was some sort of rage there, and brought upon by maybe something that was said. I don't know. That is what that would tell me. His timeline. I want to go over that just briefly. I said about 78 being his first kill. In 81, he was discharged from the Army. And again, he doesn't kill until 87. And he just said there wasn't an opportunity that presented itself. I do believe that in a way. But then again, 9 years. of something not presenting itself. Maybe. I mean, I guess that's possible. But in 81, he's discharged. In 82, he's arrested for exposing himself. Now, I want you to see the pattern here, okay? In 86, he's arrested for masturbating in front of 2 boys. They charge him with indecent exposure. In 87, he kills the gentleman at the hotel, puts him in the suitcase. Again in 87, he has another kill. Another kill. In 88, he has an assault. In 89, he kills and begins keeping the body parts. You see how that has escalated. You think about how some serial killers will go from burglary, peeping Tom, rape, murder. It's an escalation. It's, hey, I did this. I'm comfortable with that. Maybe that doesn't get me off now as much as this. I'm going to start peering in their windows. Well, that's nice. That's getting me worked up, you know. I'm going to go in for the rape. Then it's the rape. Then that happens for a while. And then all of a sudden, that's not enough. Then we got to kill. And in Dahmer's case, the killing is not enough. Now we got to take photographs. The photographs isn't enough. It's a good high now. But I got to keep the body parts. That's working great. I'm going to build a satanic altar. Why I watch Exorcist 3. That's going good. I like that. I'm getting a good thrill. But you know what would be the ultimate thrill? To eat them. That's the way they're with me forever. I have a part of them in me. That thrill from that. He's always trying to escalate and get the greater high. I equate that to drug users. If there's any former or current drug users that are watching this, think about the first time that you did heroin or you did cocaine. You're always chasing that first high. This is the same thing. You're just trying to get a little bit better each time. That's what I see in Jeffrey Dahmer. Let's see if there's anything else I want to cover about him. The time gaps, okay? 1987 to 78 to 87. And then it's every year. Then it's every month. And then it's every few days that he kills. See how that compulsion just, it's almost maddening. You can't get enough. Again, I go back to Ted Bundy. And you think of what he did that final night, or at least that final stretch, where the Chi Omega house, and then Kimberly Leach. I'm missing the victim in between, where he went from the Chi Omega right to their house, and then eventually Kimberly Leach. It was just a constant urge. Now I can't quash it anymore, nor do I want to. That's the big thing, especially with Dahmer and Bundy. They know that it's wrong and they try to quash it down, but then after a while they're like, to hell with it. I don't care if it's wrong. I'm just going to do it because it's what comes natural to me. That's what's happening here with Dahmer. He goes from years in between killings to many months to weeks to days. He's only caught when one of the victims runs from the house with a handcuff and ranch salad dressing on his ass cheek, that the police actually go back. I'm just kidding. He didn't have ranch dressing on him. But what I'm saying is it took a lot for police to actually do something. Now, there was a guy, a 14-year-old boy that Dahmer had drilled a hole in his head and tried pouring acid and boiling water to turn him into a zombie, to have that control and dominance over him. He escaped. People found him, called the cops. He's naked. Dahmer comes out and explains, he's my boyfriend. He's drunk. And these cops let him go back with him. Now, I know hindsight is 20/20. I know that. A lot of you people watching this video have never been police officers, never been on that type of call. I have. Would I have done something differently? It's easy for me to sit here and say, absolutely. And I would have. And I'm not just saying that. I'm not saying it as hindsight. You got to check the boy's ID. You know, that's number one. You have to. So, I believe, well, I'm not going to get into what I would have done as a police officer. I believe that they did not do their job. That's the bottom line. And I hope that this is wrong, and I should have researched this on that Netflix series, that those two officers got Officer of the Year awards that year. Something's wrong with that, if that's the case. If that was the case, that seems like a political move and a big to the community. That's what that would sound like to me, to further divide the police in that community. If that, in fact, happened, they should have been reprimanded. You got to get an ID. And if the boy can't talk and he's drunk or whatever, you got to get him medical assistance. Period. You just don't turn him back over to somebody without getting confirmation. That's my opinion on that. But he's eventually, another guy escapes and has the handcuff on and leads him back to the apartment. They're looking for the handcuff key. They find Polaroid pictures that he has taken, and they finally arrest him. But he had gotten away with it for over 10 years. Could it have been prevented before this? Could victims' lives been saved? Sure. Sure. I think the number one thing is when you're in Wisconsin. That's number one. You're not in Chicago, you're not in LA, you're not in New York, you're not in Atlanta. This is Wisconsin. You see all these people going missing? Somebody should have put, one of the detectives who got the missing person case, one of these 17, should have been checking other missing persons cases to find out if there's a pattern here. And then a criminal profiler should have been brought in, and I think you could have figured this out fairly quickly, but that wasn't done. So that was definitely a mistake, in my opinion. Again, this is all my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. I don't give a damn. It's my channel. I'm able to give my opinions, and that's what I do. So if you don't think that that's correct, that's fine. I don't care what you think or what you do. My opinion is these could have been prevented. But hindsight is always 20/20. Okay? When he was arrested for the sexual assault and sentenced to, what, a year in prison, but eligible for work release, because they thought alcohol was the problem. They were right on that, but I wonder how that judge feels now. You know, it's not his fault. Maybe he's trying to give somebody a second chance, but maybe if he had been a little harder on him, none of these would have happened. I don't think so. I think it would have been happened. Jeffrey Dahmer was interviewed in prison, and he said he still has those urges. That's why it's nature and not nurture. Okay? That's it. That's all I got, I think, on Jeffrey Dahmer. Great show. Netflix. Did a good job. Whoever produced that. Great job. Certainly knew right from wrong. He was not insane. He was killed in prison by another inmate. Not shocking. Okay? Death penalty. First of all, did Jeffrey Dahmer get what he deserved? Now, that takes me back to the death penalty question. I'm asked all the time whether I believe in the death penalty. And my answer used to be yes. However, my opinion has changed on that. And the reason it has changed not only is because as a professional in this field, I want to learn. I want to know more. Jeffrey Dahmer did a good job of explaining why he did certain things. Once he explains those, then he could be put to death, right? Well, no. But my reasoning for that is different. I just don't feel, I don't like the fact that a government can execute somebody. I don't like that. I don't like that a government has that control over the most precious thing there is in existence, and that is a human life. I used to not believe that. Now, am I upset that Jeffrey Dahmer was killed in prison? Absolutely not. Okay? That type of death penalty, I don't have a problem with. Now you're saying, Kenny, oh, vigilante justice. How's that any better? I'm not saying it's any better. And I'm not going to say that I agree with it. But again, you do what you want to do. I don't care. I know if Jeffrey Dahmer would have hurt one of my family members, I would not rely, nor would I want to rely, on the government taking care of my problem. That's all I'd say about that. I'm not upset that Jeffrey Dahmer died in prison. And he probably, he did, not probably, he got what he deserved. We got information from him. We got interviews with him, which was great, in order to learn. But would I want Jeffrey Dahmer to stay in prison until he was an old man? Not really. I honestly could care less. But I'm not going to shed a tear that he was pulverized to death in prison. But, on the flip side of that, I wouldn't want the government to kill him either. That's just the way I think. It's my opinion. And that's how it goes. So, that's it for Jeffrey Dahmer. If you haven't watched the Netflix series, I would highly recommend it. And that's it. Remember, hey, look at this shirt. Can you believe that? Go buy a record from these people. I don't even have a record player. But I might go get one now that they sent me vinyl. I'm probably missing out on something. When I grew up, it was just converting to CDs. It was mostly tapes. Not 8-track tapes. Although my mom had one of those 8-track players in her car. I remember. So, go check them out, would you? Support small business. Support rock and roll. And anybody that sends me something Waylon Jennings and Leonard Skinner, my two top bands in the world, obviously Elvis and Jim Morrison and Guns N' Roses and Metallica and Pantera are all up there too, but you can't go wrong with Waylon Jennings and especially my band Leonard Skinner. I just got a RVZ tattoo last week. What's RVZ? Ronnie Van Zant, lead singer of Leonard Skinner. Anyhow, I digress into music, which I often do. That's it for Jeffrey Dahmer. Until next time, hey, Maine's out.
But I ain't got